A leaden weight pressed on her temples, pulsing in unison with the deafening beeping of the machines. Each breath sent a painful tingling through her chest, as if thousands of tiny needles were piercing her lungs. Mia slightly opened her eyes, but the bright light piercing through the dimness made her immediately shut them again. She felt like a broken doll, assembled from pieces, each one aching and throbbing. Where? What happened? These questions swarmed in her mind like pesky flies. There was no answer, only fragments of memories, vivid flashes, scattered images flickered before her eyes, failing to form a coherent sequence of events. Her mouth was dry, she was tormented by thirst. She wanted to scream, to call for help, but her body didn't obey, as if paralyzed. Summoning her last strength, Mia barely opened her eyes. She was in a small room lit by dim light. White walls, medical equipment, beeping monitors, everything indicated she was in a hospital, most likely in intensive care. A barely audible rustle of footsteps made her freeze. Someone was approaching. Instinctively pretending to be asleep, Mia listened. The footsteps stopped beside her bed. At that moment, a voice sounded, once painfully familiar, but now strange and sinister. Her husband's voice. "Well, how do you like the trial and divorce?" Roger said. Mia felt a chill run down her spine. There was not a trace of sympathy in her husband's voice, only malice and mockery. She held her breath, trying not to reveal she was awake, understanding she had to be extremely careful, figure out what was going on before taking any action. "There won't be a divorce, as you can see," Roger continued with a smirk. "And no property division either. You didn't manage to file the papers in time, and now it's too late." Mia felt anger rising inside her. She knew Roger was cheating on her and wanted to get rid of her to live comfortably with his mistress. Yet, she still couldn't believe he was capable of such a thing. "How unlucky you are," Roger said, savoring each word. "A domestic gas explosion. Who would have thought? And you loved that summer house so much, dreamed of living there after the divorce." Mia struggled to hold back tears. She remembered how they had chosen that summer house together, planted trees, and dreamed of a quiet, peaceful life in nature. Now it was all destroyed. Ruined by the explosion, and, as she realized, not by accident. "Well, all right," Roger said after a pause. "I have to go. Sarah is waiting for me. I won't disturb you while you fade away alone. Goodbye." She heard her husband turn and head for the door. Then, a moment later, the intensive care unit door creaked open, and a female voice called out. "Roger, where have you been? I was worried sick." "I'm coming, honey," Roger replied. And Mia heard his footsteps fade away. When everything fell silent, she opened her eyes slightly. Now she knew the truth. With 99.9% certainty, Roger was involved in the explosion at the summer house. But why did he do it? They had lived together for 5 years. What could have driven him to such a monstrous crime? Mia recalled what had happened shortly before the tragedy at the summer house. She worked as a graphic designer. Roger was in business. Overall, an ordinary average family. Some lived better, some worse. It was just a pity they didn't have children, and now even more so. She didn't even want to think about it. Not long before Roger talked about divorce, Mia accidentally found a stash in his office. Inside was a black folder with documents, some accounts, notes, photos, call printouts, wiretaps. Although Mia didn't understand business, she immediately realized these documents probably shouldn't have been there. These papers could threaten not only her husband's career but also his freedom. She hadn't told Roger then, not wanting to alarm him, and decided to talk to him later. But then the arguments began, the quarrels, talks of divorce. Mia couldn't hold back and told him about the stash. She believed those documents were the cause of everything. Surely Roger was afraid she might tell someone, so he decided to get rid of her. Mia remembered the day of the explosion. She was at the summer house. By then, she wasn't speaking to Roger, just preparing for the divorce. She was working in the garden, digging in the soil, planting flowers. Suddenly she heard a rustle in the bushes. Looking that way, Mia saw a large stray dog. She got scared, dropped her trowel, and ran inside. The dog jumped out of the bushes and headed for the gate. Despite his size, he was very thin and clearly hungry. Seeing a bun on a tray left over from breakfast, Mia decided to feed the dog. She had nearly stepped outside when a powerful, deafening explosion occurred. Mia remembered nothing after that. A dull, exhausting pain gripped her temples, preventing her from focusing on anything. Barely moving her eyelids, she opened her eyes slightly. The bright light made her close them again. The quiet creak of the door pulled her from her half-conscious state. Mia opened her eyes again, trying not to reveal that she was awake. A man in a white coat stood by her bedside, a young doctor with a serious and intelligent look. "Mia," he said quietly, leaning over her. "Can you hear me?" She barely nodded. The man raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Strange," he muttered to himself. "Why didn't the sensors trigger?" The doctor took her hand, checked her pulse. Everything was stable, she was conscious, and the machines were silent. "That's not right." Mia whispered, barely parting her dry lips. The doctor immediately became alert. "Do you need anything? Water?" Mia nodded, feeling tears welling up in her eyes. The doctor brought a damp cotton swab to her lips. The life-giving moisture eased her suffering a little. "Who are you?" Mia whispered, trying to speak as quietly as possible. "Lucas," he answered. "Your attending physician. Don't worry, you have a concussion caused by the blast injury. But it will all pass after therapy. The important thing is that you came to." "I beg you," Mia whispered, looking him straight in the eyes. "Don't tell my husband anything." Lucas froze, surprised by her request. "What do you mean?" "That's your husband. He should know everything." "Please," Mia repeated, pleading in her eyes. "You can't trust him." Lucas hesitated. As a doctor, he didn't understand what was happening, but something in the patient's voice and her gaze made him believe her. "All right," he said after a pause. "I won't tell him for now. But you have to explain why." At that moment, the door swung open, and a nurse entered the room with a haughty expression on her face. "Lucas," she said, eyeing Mia suspiciously. "Are you okay? Other patients are waiting." "I'm fine, Leslie," he replied. "Just checking the readings. I can't figure out why the sensors didn't work. The equipment seems to be in perfect condition. We just signed a contract for new machines recently." The nurse shrugged indifferently. "Maybe someone messed with it. I heard the orderly's son is working with him today. And that Carl, a real little devil, always poking his nose where it doesn't belong." Lucas frowned. "All right, I'll keep that in mind. But let's not jump to conclusions. I'll talk to Thomas." The nurse sneered and left the room, casting a dissatisfied look at Mia as she went. Lucas looked at the patient with sympathy. "Don't worry. Everything's fine. Just a small glitch." Mia nodded, feeling fatigue gripping her body. Lucas left the room and headed to his office. To be honest, he needed to think things over. He still didn't know whom to trust. Entering his office, the doctor dialed a number. "Thomas, come see me, please," the doctor called. A few minutes later, a hospital orderly entered, short, thin, with tired eyes and a sad face. "Lucas?" he asked anxiously, looking at the doctor. "Yes, Thomas," he nodded. "I need to have a serious talk with you." Thomas paled. "What happened? Did Carl do something? Leslie told me your son is with you in the ward today. Is that true?" Thomas sighed sadly. "Yes." "Could he have touched the equipment in the room?" The doctor continued the questioning. "Come on, Lucas," the orderly exclaimed heatedly. "Carl is a well-behaved boy. Curious, of course, but he doesn't get into places he shouldn't. No, I'm strict about that. No patient contact or entering rooms allowed." "Well, in that case, I suggest you visit our patient Mia," the doctor said more amicably. "I won't keep you any longer." Mia lay there, immersed in silence and twilight. Her body was slowly recovering. The pain was easing, allowing her to relax a little and focus on what was happening. She understood that now she needed to be extremely attentive. Not to miss a single detail. To survive. And to take revenge on her husband for his betrayal. The door quietly creaked open, and an orderly entered the room. Behind him, timidly lowering his head, walked a small boy of about 8 years old. Mia immediately guessed this was probably Carl, Thomas's son, whom the nurse had accused of damaging the equipment. The orderly stopped by the bed and looked at her apologetically. "My name is Thomas. I'd like to apologize." "For what?" she asked softly, trying to speak as gently as possible. "For Carl," he replied, nodding towards his son. "He's a lively boy but would never break anything. Very well-mannered." Hearing his father's words, Carl lifted his tearful eyes to Mia. "It wasn't me," he whispered. "I didn't touch anything." Mia smiled, looking at him. "I believe you. No need to apologize. Everything is fine." Thomas sighed with relief. "Thank you." "Yes, everything's fine, don't worry," she repeated. "Can I stay here, Dad?" Carl suddenly asked, looking hopefully at Mia. Thomas looked at his son in surprise. "Well, if Mia doesn't mind?" She smiled. "I don't mind. Stay. It won't be so boring." Thomas nodded and left the room. Carl came closer and shyly looked at her. "Can I sit here?" he asked, pointing to a chair nearby. "Of course, have a seat," Mia replied. Carl was silent for a while, shyly glancing at the kind lady. "Does it hurt a lot?" he asked, breaking the silence. "A little," Mia answered. "But it's getting better." "Will you get better soon?" "I hope so. I really hope so." A pause fell in the room. Mia looked at Carl, trying to understand what kind of boy he was. There was sadness in his eyes, and at the same time, a kind of wisdom and resilience beyond his years. "Tell me something about yourself," she asked. Carl thought for a moment, then began to speak. He talked about his school, friends, favorite books, and movies. But most of all, about his mother. Her name was Masha. She was very kind. And the most beautiful. Mia listened, holding her breath. She was interested in everything. "How did your parents meet?" she asked. Carl smiled. "Dad almost missed his stop on the bus, and Mom woke him up." "And what happened next?" Mia inquired. "Dad asked Mom out," Carl replied. "And they started dating. And then I was born. But 4 years later Mom got sick. She thought she would get better and didn't tell Dad. But then it was too late. She stopped feeling anything. Dad had to call an ambulance. They took Mom away, but 3 days later she was gone. Dad cried a lot. And I don't remember anything from that time. They sent me to my grandma in the village then. Mia felt tears welling up in her eyes. She understood the pain that this family had endured. "You're brave," Mia said, squeezing his tiny hand. "You're very strong." Carl sighed and looked out the window. "I really miss Mom," he whispered. Mia gently touched his cheek. "I understand. But don't be sad, everything will get better. I'm sure Mom is watching over you from heaven." "Really?" Carl brightened. "Of course. I'm sure of it." The boy sat a little longer, then politely said goodbye and left. Carl's story about his mother deeply touched Mia. She understood the grief this little boy had endured and sincerely sympathized with him. Involuntarily, Mia drifted back into her thoughts, trying to piece together the fragments of the tangled puzzle. A thought flashed through her mind: what if this nurse is somehow connected to her husband? Maybe Leslie works for him? Suddenly she remembered how Leslie had insistently accused the boy of breaking the equipment. Perhaps she was just trying to distract attention to cover up her own actions. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft creak of the door. A man in a formal suit entered the room. His face was serious and focused. "Hello, Mia," the stranger said, extending his hand. "I'm Investigator Eric Stone." Mia struggled to respond to the handshake. "Hello," she replied, trying to hide her nervousness. "I'm very sorry you had to go through this," the policeman began, looking at her with sympathy. "We are conducting an investigation into the explosion at your dacha." Mia nodded. "We know you were alone in the house. As a result of the explosion, a fire broke out. The house was completely destroyed." Mia remained silent, waiting for the investigator to continue. "You were very lucky to survive. It's simply a miracle." She frowned. "A miracle? What do you mean?" "The thing is, right after the explosion, a strong fire broke out, and someone pulled you out of the fire's epicenter. You came out almost unharmed, suffering only a concussion and minor burns." Mia was shocked. She did not remember anything that happened after the explosion. "And who saved me?" she asked, looking hopefully at the visitor. "Unfortunately, we don't know yet. This person disappeared right after rescuing you. We are searching for him." "What about the dog?" Mia suddenly asked. "The big dog. I saw him before the explosion." The investigator looked at her with surprise. Mia told him about the stray animal she had seen by the gate. The investigator listened carefully and clasped his fingers together. Interesting information. We will check that." Silence fell. The investigator looked at her thoughtfully, as if trying to read her mind. "Mia," he finally said, "I have something to tell you." She tensed. Her premonition was bad. "During the investigation, we found out your husband has large debts, bank loans and private loans, debts that could harm not only him but also those close to him." Mia was stunned. She knew nothing about Roger's debts. "But where did this come from?" she whispered. "It's connected to his business," Eric Stone continued. "Lately, he has been facing serious financial problems. And not long before the accident, Roger Petrovich insured your life for a considerable amount. So, in case of your death, he was supposed to receive the insurance money. Theoretically, this would allow him to pay off the debts and start a new life." Mia was silent. Everything the investigator said seemed unreal. Could it really be that her husband was to blame for everything? Meanwhile, outside the door, in the hospital corridor, other no less important events were unfolding. Carl, who still couldn't calm down after talking with Mia, decided to walk around the ward a little. Curiosity and the thirst for adventure drove him forward, making him forget his father's strict warnings. Imagining he was playing hide-and-seek with himself, the boy tried to be unnoticed, like his favorite cartoon superhero. Then, quietly sneaking along the wall, he heard a low conversation coming from the nurse's station. Approaching, the boy pressed his ear to the door and tried to make out the words. The voice belonged to Leslie. "Yes, everything is going according to plan," the nurse said into the phone. "But we have to be on guard. Something irreversible could happen at any moment." Carl froze like a rabbit seeing a boa constrictor. The boy became scared. Although he didn't understand what the woman was talking about, he felt that there was some danger in her words. "I'll do everything tomorrow morning," Leslie continued. "No one will suspect anything. The main thing is that this orderly doesn't stick his nose where it doesn't belong. He's too meticulous. Although that's a minor problem." Carl heard a click. Leslie had ended the call. He jumped back from the door in fright and ran away. Soon, around the corner, he bumped into Lucas walking down the corridor. The doctor looked at the boy with obvious disapproval, muttering something unintelligible about children not belonging here. Of course, the resuscitation doctor understood Thomas perfectly. There was simply nowhere to leave his son during the summer holidays. Carl looked at the doctor with anxiety, wondering whether to tell him about the overheard conversation or not. What if he scolded him, said it was wrong? To be honest, the boy himself felt ashamed of what had happened. But, on the other hand, time couldn't be turned back. What's done is done. Mia barely had time to absorb the information from the investigator when the door to the room was rudely thrown open and Leslie entered. There was no trace of sympathy or concern on her face, only cold indifference and some hidden malice. "Injections," she muttered, heading toward Mia with a syringe in her hand. Mia tried to sit up, but her body was weak and uncooperative. She timidly turned her head away, trying to avoid the nurse's gaze. "What's the matter?" Leslie asked irritably, quickly wiping the injection site with alcohol. "Don't like injections?" Mia flinched from the pain but didn't make a sound. "You all want the same thing," Leslie continued. "Just whining and complaining. No gratitude whatsoever." Mia struggled to look at her. "And what am I supposed to be grateful to you for?" Leslie sneered contemptuously. "For taking care of you. And the fact that you're still alive." Mia clenched her fists, trying to hold back her anger. "I didn't ask to be saved," she whispered. An unfriendly spark flashed in Leslie's eyes. "Oh, you didn't ask? So what did you want, to die? So your husband could live comfortably with his mistress? Or do you think I don't know who he showed up with at the ward? Such a pretty blonde, legs for days." Mia was silent, stunned by the nurse's rude personal attack. "Yes, I know everything," Leslie continued, looking at her with hostility. "Believe me, I'm aware your husband is a scoundrel and a traitor. But you're no better." "What are you saying?" Mia whispered, barely holding back tears. "That you don't appreciate your happiness," the nurse exclaimed. "You had money, a house, a husband. And what do I have?" Leslie fell silent, breathing heavily. Tears filled her eyes. "Do you know why I am like this?" she asked, looking at Mia with despair. "Because my fiancé left me. Found out I was pregnant and ran away like a coward." Mia looked at her in surprise. "And what am I supposed to do now?" Leslie continued, sobbing. "Where will I go with the child when it's born? To a tiny apartment with my parents? Who would marry me with someone else's baby? At least the bump isn't showing yet. She wiped her tears and looked at Mia with hatred. So now I have to please all kinds of men, she added angrily, just so someone would marry me. At that moment, Mia felt a pang of pity for this unfortunate woman, understanding that desperation drove her. I'm very sorry, Mia said, extending her hand. I sincerely sympathize with you. Leslie pulled her hand back as if from fire. Don't pity me. I don't need your pity. The nurse glared maliciously at her and left the room, slamming the door. Mia was left alone, shaken by what she had heard. Deep down, she understood the nurse was a victim of circumstances, an unhappy woman driven to despair. But, on the other hand, was Mia to blame for that? Everyone is the architect of their own happiness, and misfortune too. Alone in the silence and dim light of the hospital room, Mia drifted back into the distant past, to those happy days when life seemed cloudless and beautiful. She remembered how, as a budding artist, she earned extra money decorating shop windows and painting commissioned portraits. On New Year's Eve, a young man approached her. The client was tall, stately, with a charming smile and kind eyes. He introduced himself as Roger and asked her to paint a portrait of his mother for her anniversary. Mia was flattered by the request. The young artist immediately liked the client, his manner of speaking, confidence, gallantry. But when she learned that he was in business and quite successful, she suddenly doubted her abilities. The portrait had to be special, reflecting the character and soul of the person. I'm not sure I can fulfill your order, Mia said, bashfully lowering her eyes. After all, I'm just a beginner. Oh, don't be modest, Roger smiled. I've seen your work, it's wonderful. Besides, I don't need a professional. I need someone who will put their soul into the portrait, not just copy a photograph. Roger's words touched Mia. She felt in her heart that he truly believed in her. In the end, she agreed to take the commission. Let me do it for free, she suddenly offered. It will be my gift to your mother. Roger looked at her in surprise. Why? I'm willing to pay any amount. I don't need money, Mia replied with a smile. I just want to do something nice for your mother. Well, and for you too, at the same time. Roger was impressed by her selflessness. He realized that he was dealing with a special girl, not like anyone else he had met before. Mia enthusiastically threw herself into the work. She spent hours in the studio, painting the portrait from a photograph. Deep down, she wanted it to be perfect, to reflect all the beauty and kindness of this woman. Roger often visited her, bringing coffee, fruit, telling her about his life and family. Warm friendship blossomed between them, which soon grew into something more. Without even noticing it, they began spending all their free time together, walking in parks, going to theaters and movies, reading books aloud. Mia was happier than ever before. When the portrait was finished, Roger was delighted. He said it was the best gift he had ever given his mother. Mia, he said, looking her straight in the eyes, you're not only a talented artist but also a wonderful person. I want you to always be by my side. Soon he proposed to her. Mia didn't hesitate for a second and accepted. The wedding preparations were in full swing. The girl was happy but also a little worried. Like any young bride, she understood she was entering a new family where she might not be accepted right away. Mia was especially anxious about her mother-in-law. She knew Mindy was a strong-willed woman, used to keeping everything under control. About 2 weeks before the wedding, Roger's mother invited her for tea. Mia felt like she was taking an exam. The mother-in-law was very hospitable and polite, but Mia noticed a hidden wariness in her gaze. Mia, Mindy began after a short conversation about wedding preparations, I'm very glad you're going to be my son's wife. But I want you to know something. Mia tensed, sensing a trap. I love Roger very much and want him to be happy. But I need to be sure that you really love my son, and not his money. I've never been materialistic, Mia replied, pouting slightly in offense. And I love Roger not for his money, but for who he is as a person. Mindy smiled. I understand. But you have to understand me too. I need to test you. It's for Roger's sake, but also for your family's. What do you mean? Mia asked. I propose you take a small test, the mother-in-law replied. If you pass it, I will be sure of your feelings. Mia frowned. What kind of test? Please work as a cleaner at our company with Roger for a week, Mindy said. If you manage this job, I'll know you're ready to do anything for Roger. Mia was shocked by the proposal. She had never worked as a cleaner before and didn't even know what the duties involved. In the end, she agreed, wanting to prove to Mindy that her feelings were sincere. For a whole week, Mia worked as a janitor at Roger's company, mopping floors, dusting, taking out the trash. It was hard, dirty work, but she didn't complain. She patiently followed all the mother-in-law's instructions, trying to do everything as well as possible. At the end of the week, Mindy called her to her office. I watched you every day, she said, looking at her daughter-in-law with approval. And I must admit, you pleasantly surprised me. They say about girls like you, she can walk into a burning house and stop a galloping horse. So I won't stand in the way of your wedding. My advice and love to you both. Remembering this now, Mia couldn't hold back tears. How foolish she had been to agree to the whims of this crazy family. And what did she get in return? Nothing but betrayal, and nothing more. While Mia painfully tried to remember her past, suddenly some automatic lighting control system in one of the hospital wards broke down. It didn't pose any direct threat to the patients' lives, but caused extreme irritation for Lucas. After all the equipment was new, just purchased from the supplier. There's no way the equipment breaks down this often, Lucas grumbled as he examined the malfunction. Either they sold us a defective batch, or someone is deliberately sabotaging the devices. As luck would have it, Leslie happened to be nearby, ready at any moment to add fuel to the fire. I told you, she said haughtily. It's all Carl's fault. That homeless kid is to blame. He's always wandering where he shouldn't and touching everything. Hearing this, Thomas immediately defended his son. That's not true, he exclaimed. Carl couldn't have done it. My son is well behaved. What do you know about your own son? The nurse sneered contemptuously. You're always off at work, and your chatterbox is left unsupervised. A quarrel broke out, drawing the attention of other hospital staff. The rumor about the incident quickly reached the chief physician, a stern and authoritative man. It ended with the boss, who could not tolerate scandals and disorder, calling the resuscitation doctor in for a reprimand. What's going on over there, Lucas? Bruce asked threateningly, looking at the young doctor over his glasses. Why do you have constant breakdowns and chaos in your department? Lucas tried to explain the situation, but the chief didn't even let him finish. I don't want excuses, he interrupted. I demand you get things in order. And to start with, I've decided to fire that orderly. He's no good. We'll manage without him somehow. Lucas was shocked. But, Bruce, he's an excellent employee. He definitely isn't to blame for what's happening. I don't care, the chief doctor cut him off. He doesn't keep an eye on his son, and I won't tolerate that in my hospital. There are rules of internal order, after all, and they apply to everyone. Lucas tried to defend the orderly, but the chief doctor was adamant. "If you don't calm down, Lucas," he threatened, "you'll likely be next on the list for dismissal." Lucas understood, arguing was pointless. He was powerless against such authority. Feeling down, the man left the corridor and headed to Thomas to deliver the sad news. Upon learning about the dismissal, the orderly was literally demoralized. The widower also fully understood that it would now be difficult to find another job, especially with a small child. Yes, Carl was no baby, but it was still too early to call him independent. Lucas sincerely felt sorry for the orderly but could do nothing to help. The doctor also felt guilty for not being able to defend such a loyal and conscientious employee before the management. Then, secretly from everyone, Lucas decided to act on his own since he could not allow an innocent person to suffer because of someone's intrigues and schemes. The doctor remembered an old acquaintance he had once saved from death by performing a complicated surgery. He and Patrick had long been on a first-name basis and considered themselves friends. Sasha was involved in electronics trading and had connections in many circles. After some thought, Lucas contacted him and asked for a favor. "Patrick, here's the thing. I need some hidden surveillance cameras, very small, inconspicuous ones, the kind you have." "And why is that?" the businessman asked, surprised. "Planning to spy on patients?" Lucas explained the situation, naturally keeping silent about Mia and her suspicions about her husband. After listening, Patrick promised to help. "Don't worry, I'll find everything you need. You once pulled me back from the brink, debts must be repaid." Lucas thanked him and hung up. Frankly, the doctor hoped that with hidden surveillance he would identify those who were deliberately damaging the equipment and accusing innocent people. Of course, Lucas understood that he was risking his career by doing this, but he could not act otherwise. After all, he was a doctor, and his duty was to protect patients and fight for justice. And while Lucas secretly prepared to conduct his own investigation, equally dramatic events were unfolding far from the hospital walls. Roger, confident in his impunity and Mia's imminent demise, arrived at the site of the recent fire that had destroyed their summer house, accompanied by his mistress. The faces of the lovers showed not a hint of sympathy or grief, only malice and anticipation of quick gain. "Well," Sarah cooed, hugging him by the waist, "soon we'll live like kings. Mia is a goner, and the insurance will cover all the debts." Roger smirked smugly. "I don't doubt it. Someone will build a luxurious mansion with a lake view right on top of this wreck." With those words, the businessman took a measuring tape from the car and began methodically measuring the land, already planning to sell the plot for development. He couldn't care less about the memories of the past or the happy days he had spent here with Mia. Roger's thoughts were entirely consumed by money and the new life he intended to build on her ashes. "I'll need to hire a crew to tear down all this junk," Roger said, looking around at the charred remains with distaste. At that moment, a large stray dog, the very one Mia had seen before the explosion, jumped out of the bushes. Startled, Roger recoiled and grabbed a stick lying on the ground. "You mangy mutt," he shouted. "I'll teach you a lesson." The businessman swung at the dog, but it nimbly dodged and gave his leg a gentle nip. "What if it's rabid?" Sarah squealed. "Please, do something." Enraged and frightened, Roger raised the stick again, aiming to strike the dog hard. "Stop right there," a commanding voice called out from behind him. Roger turned and saw a detective standing under a tree, observing the scene closely. "What are you doing here?" Roger asked, trying to hide his confusion. "This is private property." "I'm conducting an investigation," Eric Stone replied. "And I strongly advise you not to touch that animal." As if sensing it was now under protection, the dog walked over to the detective and pressed its snout against his leg. Eric Stone patted the dog on the head and looked at Roger with contempt. Realizing his position was becoming precarious again, Mia's husband decided to change tactics. He stepped closer to the detective and said quietly, "I understand you're just doing your job, but maybe we can come to an agreement. I'd be happy to show my appreciation." The detective looked at him with disgust. "Are you trying to bribe me?" Roger went pale. "No, of course not. I just wanted to thank you for your hard work." "Attempting to bribe a public official is a criminal offense," Eric Stone said coldly. "I suggest you keep that in mind." Roger lowered his head in silence. "And now," the detective continued, "I ask that you leave the scene and not return here without my permission." Without a word, Roger got into the car with Sarah and drove off. Eric Stone watched the car disappear into the distance, then looked down at the dog, who was gazing up at him with trust. "Well, buddy, how about coming with me? There's nothing for you here anymore." The detective led the dog to his car, parked a little further away. The dog obediently followed his new acquaintance. Eric opened the front door and gestured for the dog to get in. Without hesitation, it jumped onto the passenger seat and placed its paws on the dashboard. Eric Stone smiled. "Well, aren't you bold? Like you've been riding in my car your whole life." He got behind the wheel and smoothly pulled away. Glancing sideways at his passenger, the detective suddenly realized something. The dog's eyes seemed hauntingly familiar. And then it hit him. The dog was looking at him exactly the way his late friend Igor used to, Igor, who had died a month ago in the line of duty. A true professional, always ready to help in tough times. Eric had taken his death hard, and had even vowed to support Igor's widow and young daughter however he could. "All right, Bosun. Hope you like the name," the detective said with a smile as he turned onto the highway. "You're going to live with me now. I'm a lonely man, and there's more than enough room at my place." All in all, despite her troubled thoughts and vague unease, Mia's day passed relatively calmly. Her exhausted body had taken over, plunging her into a deep, though restless sleep. Mild chills and a slight fever brought some discomfort, but overall, her condition had stabilized. When Mia woke up closer to evening, she felt a little better. Her mind was clearer, and her body was filling with a faint but tangible energy. The first thing she did was glance around the room, trying to understand what had happened while she was asleep. On the bedside table lay a small piece of paper, folded into quarters. Mia struggled to raise her hand, picked it up, and unfolded it. It was a note, written in an unsteady child's hand. Jagged little letters appeared on the sheet. "Dad got fired because they said I ruined everything, and we're leaving. It's a shame it turned out this way. Thank you for everything. Carl." Her heart clenched with pain. Mia imagined the young widower, crushed and distressed, forced to leave the hospital after losing his job and means of support. Thomas and Carl, they had become a ray of light for her in this dark world of lies and betrayal. These kind people reminded her that kindness, compassion, and mercy still existed in the world. That night, when the hospital was cloaked in silence, Lucas, risking his career, began to carry out his plan. He installed hidden cameras throughout the ward. The doctor placed them in hallways, the nurse's station, and in some patient rooms that had not yet suffered malfunctions. Lucas was convinced, with these recordings, he could uncover the truth and expose everyone involved in the wrongdoing. Meanwhile, in a luxurious apartment in an upscale district of the city, Roger had just learned from Leslie that Mia had regained consciousness. After her call, the businessman was in a panic. "What do we do now?" Sarah cried hysterically, wringing her hands. She'll tell the investigator everything now. Roger remained silent, torn by doubt. He understood the situation was spiraling out of control. He had to make a decision, and fast. Maybe we run away? Huh? Sarah suggested. Right now? Forget the insurance payout. Let's take what money we have left and get as far away as possible. Roger hesitated. The last thing he wanted was to be on the run from justice, living in constant fear. Roger, think about it, Sarah said, hugging him and looking into his eyes. If we stay, they'll throw us in jail. Is that what you want? Let's at least wait a bit, he finally said. Maybe it'll still blow over? It won't blow over, Sarah exclaimed. She's awake, and the investigator will realize the explosion wasn't an accident. In the end, Roger, swayed by Sarah's pleas, made his decision. All right, we'll leave. But not tomorrow. There's something I need to finish first. Relieved, Sarah leaned into Roger. The next morning, the hospital greeted Mia with the same oppressive silence and a sense of looming danger. Her memory, like a mosaic, was gradually piecing itself back together, forming an ever clearer picture. Familiar faces once again appeared in the ward's hallways, some inspiring trust, others causing unease. Among them was Leslie, who seemed unusually energetic and confident today. Mia couldn't shake the feeling that the nurse was up to something. Leslie, as if sensing Mia's gaze, cast a haughty smirk in her direction and walked toward the chief physician's office. Mia suspected Leslie was once again trying to curry favor with Bruce, hoping to be promoted to head nurse. Meanwhile, after his morning rounds, Lucas, exhausted from a sleepless night, returned home after his shift. But before going to bed, he decided to review the latest video recording, made just that morning. The moment he looked at the screen, the doctor froze, stunned by what he saw. The footage clearly showed a nurse, after making sure no one was watching, deliberately disabling a piece of equipment in the room of a critically ill patient. Lucas was furious and struggled to believe that Leslie, someone he had trusted, could be capable of such a thing. Grabbing his laptop, he immediately headed to the chief physician's office to report what he had discovered. A tense silence hung over Bruce's office. The director, grim-faced, was scribbling something in his notebook. Bruce, Lucas said as he entered, we need to talk. It's urgent. Is something wrong? The chief physician asked, lifting his heavy gaze. I found out who's been sabotaging the equipment in our ward. Bruce raised his eyebrows in surprise. Really? And who is it? It's Leslie, our nurse, Lucas replied. And I have proof. He immediately showed the surveillance footage. Bruce was shocked. That's just not possible, he muttered. Leslie has always been so diligent, so responsible. Unfortunately, as you can see, Lucas replied. I don't know what made her do this, but it's clear she wasn't acting alone. The chief physician, pulling himself together, immediately summoned the guilty woman to his office. Leslie, he said, looking at his subordinate with disdain, you are accused of deliberately damaging medical equipment. What do you have to say in your defense? Leslie turned pale when she saw the footage. That wasn't me. It's all been edited. Don't lie, her supervisor interrupted. I have irrefutable proof of your guilt. Tell us everything as it happened. Under the pressure of the evidence, Leslie broke down and confessed. She admitted that she had been hired by a representative of a rival company that sold medical equipment. As a nurse, she had been instructed to sabotage machines that weren't critical for patient care in order to push for new purchases from the intended supplier. Deep down, Leslie had hoped to receive a generous reward and a promotion for her actions, but her plans were not meant to succeed. Bruce was furious. "You're fired, and I will personally make sure you never work in medicine again." Sobbing, Leslie was ready to fall to her knees before him, begging for forgiveness. The chief physician hesitated, then suggested convening a small board to decide the nurse's fate. News of what had happened spread quickly through the hospital. Everyone was shocked and outraged by her actions. Ironically, it was none other than Lucas who came to Leslie's defense, asking that she be given one last chance. His vote turned out to be decisive in the board's decision on whether to fire Leslie or not. The revelation of the nurse's betrayal and her malicious plan felt like a breath of fresh air, a sign that the nightmare might finally be coming to an end. However, she knew this was only a small part of the truth. The real villains were still at large. Her thoughts returned to the hidden stash in Roger's office and those mysterious documents that might have been the key to everything. She finally realized she had to tell the investigator as soon as possible. Summoning her strength, Mia asked the nurse to call him to her. Eric Stone entered the room. His face was serious and focused. He listened intently to her story, without interrupting or asking unnecessary questions. "I'm very sorry I didn't speak up earlier," Mia said when she finished. "I was just scared and didn't know who to trust." Eric Stone nodded. "I understand your concerns. But what's most important now is helping us uncover the truth." After a brief pause, the investigator added, "You know, I'd like to tell you a story." Mia looked at him with surprise. "A story about the dog you saw before the explosion," Eric explained. Mia held her breath. "After hearing your account, I decided to learn more about the animal. And what I found stunned me." He then recounted the sad story of Bosun. Turns out, he used to work as a river rescue assistant. Being an intelligent and loyal dog, he helped save many lives on the river alongside his owner. But one day, the owner fell seriously ill with a high fever. Later it turned out he had double pneumonia, and he started treatment too late. When the rescuer passed away, Bosun missed him terribly and came to his grave for nearly a month, howling at night. Then, unable to bear the separation, the dog fled the river rescue service and began to wander. I don't know how, but during his roaming, Bosun ended up near your country house, the investigator continued. I'm sure it was he who pulled you from the fire at the risk of his own life. Listening to this story, Mia couldn't hold back her tears. She was deeply moved. Poor thing, she whispered, wiping her eyes. He saved me, risking his own life. Yes, Eric said. Bosun is a true hero. He paused, then added. You know, Mia, I somehow believe that the spirit of my late friend and colleague Chuck has entered that dog. They're so alike, brave and responsible. Thank you. Now I know whom I owe my life to, Mia said. He nodded and left the room, promising to keep her updated. That same day, Roger was arrested at the airport as he tried to flee the country. Sarah was still in hiding, but her capture was only a matter of time. Shortly after Roger's arrest, Thomas returned to the hospital. The chief physician apologized to him and reinstated him in his position. When Carl found out, he ran to Mia's hospital room and hugged her tightly. I missed you so much, Aunt Mia. A week flew by, filled with events, discoveries, and unexpected twists. As Mia gradually recovered from the trauma she had endured, she felt something new awakening within her, something vibrant and full of light. She no longer saw herself as a helpless victim, but as a strong, determined woman ready to fight for her future. Asking Lucas for paints and a canvas, she decided to express her gratitude to Bosun through a work of art. Mia wanted to capture his courage, loyalty, and extraordinary beauty. And as if by magic, Bosun truly transformed into a handsome dog. His fur gleamed, a spark lit up in his eyes, and his gait became confident and graceful. Carl helped her with the portrait, always nearby like a little guardian angel. He handed her paints, cleaned the brushes, told funny stories, and simply offered his quiet, comforting presence. A special bond formed between them, filled with warmth and tenderness. She treated him like family, and he responded with genuine love and devotion. At the same time, a spark of affection began to grow between Mia and Thomas. The orderly, watching her care for his son, couldn't help but admire her. He appreciated her kindness, sincerity, and her natural way with children. In turn, Mia saw in Thomas a reliable, decent, and hard-working man, someone who could offer love and happiness. Their relationship developed slowly and cautiously, but with each passing day, they grew closer and more precious to each other. In a twist of fate, Leslie's life also began to change. Regretful of her actions, she actively cooperated with the investigation, helping to expose others involved in the criminal scheme. During the course of the proceedings, Leslie grew close to the investigator, Eric, who, seeing her sincere remorse, responded with compassion and understanding. When Eric learned that she was pregnant and struggling, he immediately offered his support. Over time, their bond deepened into something more. Eric was ready to accept Leslie and her unborn child, to become a loving husband and father to them. Finally, the long-awaited day of Mia's discharge arrived. She had been looking forward to it, dreaming of returning to normal life and starting fresh. Mia left the hospital arm in arm with Thomas, glowing with happiness and love. Carl ran ahead, waving a bouquet of flowers, while Bosun trotted proudly beside them, wagging his tail and barking joyfully. It seemed nothing could darken that perfect moment. But suddenly, Sarah appeared from around the corner of the building. Hatred and a thirst for revenge burned in her eyes. She clutched a pair of scissors in her hand. "I'll avenge Roger," she screamed, rushing at Mia. "You ruined our lives." Time seemed to freeze. Mia, paralyzed with fear, couldn't move. Thomas, caught off guard, froze and didn't react in time. But Bosun, sensing danger, immediately leapt to protect her. He lunged at Sarah, grabbed her dress, and threw her to the ground. She shrieked in fury but dropped the scissors. Security guards rushed in, restrained her, and handed her over to the police. Coming to her senses, Mia threw her arms around Bosun and hugged him tightly. "Thank you, my hero," she whispered, kissing his wet nose. "You saved me again." A month later, the long-awaited justice was finally served. The courtroom was filled with tense silence, broken only by hushed whispers from the audience. On the defendant's bench sat a pale and worn Roger and Sarah, fully aware of the gravity of their crimes and the inevitability of punishment. Mia was overwhelmed by a swirl of emotions: anger, pain, disappointment, but also relief and hope for a just resolution. She looked at Roger, the man she once loved more than anything, and no longer recognized him. His eyes were empty, completely lifeless, and there wasn't a trace of remorse on his face. After hearing the arguments from both prosecution and defense, the court, having considered all aspects of the case, finally delivered its verdict. When Eric found out about her pregnancy and difficult life situation, he immediately offered his help. Over time, a bond of affection grew between them and blossomed into something more. Eric was ready to accept Leslie along with her unborn child, to become a loving husband and father to them both. Finally, the long-awaited day of Mia's discharge arrived. She had been looking forward to it with great anticipation, dreaming of returning to a normal life and starting fresh. Mia stepped out of the hospital on Thomas's arm, radiant with happiness and love. Carl ran ahead, waving a bouquet of flowers. Bosun trotted proudly beside them, wagging his tail and barking joyfully. It seemed nothing could spoil this perfect moment. But suddenly, Sarah appeared from behind the corner of the building. Hatred and a thirst for revenge blazed in her eyes. She was clutching a pair of scissors. "I'll avenge Roger," she screamed, lunging at Mia. "You ruined our lives." Time stood still. Mia, paralyzed with fear, couldn't move. Thomas, caught off guard, froze and didn't manage to react in time. But Bosun, sensing danger, sprang into action. He leapt at Sarah, grabbed her dress with his teeth, and threw her to the ground. Sarah screamed in fury but dropped the scissors. Security guards rushed over, restrained her, and handed her to the police. Coming to her senses, Mia ran to Bosun and embraced him tightly. "Thank you, my hero," she whispered, kissing his wet nose. "You saved me again." A month later, the day of long-awaited justice arrived. The courtroom was steeped in tense silence, interrupted only by quiet whispers among those present. On the defendant's bench sat a pale, haggard Roger and Sarah, fully aware of the weight of their crimes and the inevitability of punishment. Mia was overwhelmed by a whirlwind of emotions: anger, pain, disappointment, but also relief and hope for a fair resolution. She looked at Roger, the man she had once loved more than anything in the world, and could no longer recognize him. His eyes were empty, completely lifeless, and there wasn't a trace of remorse on his face. After hearing arguments from both the prosecution and defense, and taking all the circumstances into account, the court finally delivered its verdict. Roger, found guilty of attempted murder and fraud, was sentenced to a lengthy prison term. Sarah, as an accomplice, also received her punishment. Mia, hearing the verdict, sighed with relief. Justice had prevailed, and now she could look to the future without fearing for her life. Shortly after the trial, Mia officially divorced Roger. The process went quickly and without complications. Her ex-husband did not contest the decisions and accepted his fate. At that moment, Thomas, realizing the significance of what had happened, looked at Mia with worry and love. "Mia, I can't wait any longer," he said with a trembling voice. "I love you. Will you marry me?" Without hesitating for a second, she answered yes. Carl happily rushed to hug her and, for the first time, called Mia Mom. Tears streamed down Mia's cheeks. She realized that from now on, her life would be completely different. She felt happy.